Are America's veterans okay? That's the question that is on my mind, at least in the wake of two horrific attacks across the United States, both perpetrated by veterans in my age group. In fact, veterans that served in Afghanistan in the same time I did. We're going to break down just these attacks, how multi-layered they are, but more importantly, what things look like from the perspective of Americans' veterans. Let's get into it. All right, you guys know I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Hit that subscribe button, that helps. Okay, so I want to talk about this thing in layers because you have to understand the layers of it. Now, the first instance is pretty horrific, right? In New Orleans, a suspect an Army veteran inspired by or loyal to ISIS, the terror group, conducted a pretty vicious attack of a truck, again, adorned with the ISIS flag, driving down Bourbon Street, killing 15 people. The individual who perpetrated this was a U.S. citizen veteran named Shamsuddin Jabbar, who was killed at the scene. He served on active duty from March 2007 until January 2015 as a human resource specialist and information technology specialist, essentially a desk job, the most desk job you can get. And he deployed to Afghanistan just slightly before I did in February 2009 to 2010. Again, a 12-month deployment. He also continued his Army career in the Army Reserve, working as an IT specialist until 4 years ago, ending his career as a staff sergeant. Now, in the hours before the attack, Jabbar posted videos on social media expressing a desire to kill and indicating that he was inspired by ISIS. There's also some evidence that he engaged in another sort of unhinged level of thinking, talking about killing his children, and that he was inspired to join ISIS by a dream. But in some of the interviews I've heard, he reportedly was a pretty stable guy until a pretty sudden break in his, we'll say, mental status. And the other instance I wanted to point out is the individual who basically self-immolated in a Cybertruck outside of Trump Tower. This was a 37-year-old Special Forces veteran who drove the Cybertruck outside the International Trump Hotel in Las Vegas on New Year's Day and blew himself up. He was identified as a Green Beret based in Colorado Springs. And he reportedly served in Afghanistan. Let's see if we can get it. Basically, or was a Green Beret from 2006 to 2023 at least, and was deployed, it looks like, in January 2010. So during the same time frame. And now, before you're like, wow, that's really suspicious, what I want to point out is that this time frame, the 2009 to about 2011, was during the surge. This was when the U.S. doubled the number of troops in Afghanistan to 100,000. So you're talking about the period in which the largest number of troops were deployed to that country. And, you know, what I want to point out is there's some really fundamental differences because I don't want you guys to lump these people together. And this is best understood in layers, all of which are true, right? The New Orleans attack at its base layer is a terror attack, is an Islamic-inspired terror attack. His intention was clearly to kill and maim as many innocent people as possible. It was horrific in its own right. It also appears that there was a mental health layer to both of these. Both these individuals appeared to have some level of mental health issues. But what I want to talk about is the next layer up, and to ask yourself, how do you produce, or rather, how has this country churned out millions of disaffected veterans, right? Veterans, throughout the 20th century were considered some of the building blocks of key American institutions, right? A lot of the post-World War II boom era and institutionalization era was the product of veterans of the First and Second World Wars. So how did America's veterans go from one perspective of being the country's staunchest defenders and greatest builders to being individuals who are, again, committing some severe terror attacks. And that's what I wanted to talk about, because I'm a veteran from this era. In fact, I'm the same age as Mr. Livsberger, the individual who took his own life detonating the Cybertruck. And, you know, I just wanted to give you guys a perspective on sort of what you see when you are at this age living in this country. What I wanted to first point out is the fact that there's a key difference. The World War II era veterans, even Korean War veterans, they won. They ensured America's victory. But the United States, we did not win in Afghanistan. The Taliban won. The fundamentalist religious extremists won. They took over the country. The U.S.-backed government utterly collapsed in humiliating fashion, lasting literally days without U.S. support. And remember, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. For 20 years and $2 trillion, the United States bankrolled the Afghan government. They swore that they were going to create a democracy. It was going to be secular. Everybody was going to get to participate, right? They were going to try to create a modern liberal democracy in one of the most conservative countries on earth. And now the Taliban runs the country. And we see headlines like this all the time, right? That the Taliban banning women from being employed, but also being seen outside the house. They've banned music. These are, I mean, you can see women literally are as close to being unpersoned as you can get and still be a human being. Taliban authorities banned education for women and girls. Now, we went into Afghanistan for a bunch of reasons, not just, defending women's rights or whatever. And but the fundamental idea that we were going to go and we're going to help the Afghans throw off the yoke of these pretty horrific religious ultra oppressors was a noble cause in a lot of soldiers' minds, right? We were going to free an oppressed people. And the fact is that the U.S. government committed what any other government would call a criminal level of fraud. And this is not me saying this. I believe this, but this is also backed up by an op-ed that just dropped yesterday from John F. Sopko. Sopko is a special inspector general for Afghanistan reconstruction who has spent 12 years in the role. And what his job is, he was empowered by Congress to investigate, to say, hey, listen, take a neutral group of auditors, investigators, and I spent 7 years in an inspector general office for the Department of Homeland Security. And so they really are independent, and they're tasked with getting to the bottom of some questions. And the question that Mr. Sopko and his team spent 12 years answering is, what the hell happened in Afghanistan? And he says, I've audited and investigated U.S. programs spending to rebuild Afghanistan, a mission that it was hoped would turn the theocratic, tribal-based graveyard of empires into a modern liberal democracy. And U.S. government, what he found, struggled to carry out a coherent strategy fostered by overly ambitious expectations, unsustainable projects, didn't understand the country or its people. American agencies measured success by not by what they accomplished, but by dollars spent or checklists of completed tasks, right? There was a lot, what they found, and this is a absolutely fascinating read, but it really talks about the fact that the soldiers that fought in this war were the only people, were the only honest brokers in the entire conflict, right? In order to win promotions and bigger salaries, he writes, military and civilian leaders felt they had to sell their tours of duty, deployments, programs, and projects as successes, even when they were not. Leaders tended to report and highlight favorable information while obscuring that which pointed to failure. After all, failures don't lead to an ambassadorship or elevation to general, right? They also aren't good business for contractors, on which the U.S. mission relied. For contractors, claiming success, real or imaginary, was vital to obtaining future business, so spending became a measure of success. Accountability for how money was spent was poor. One general told the inspector, Mr. Sopko, that he faced a challenge, how did he spend $1 billion from his annual budget in just over a month? That is your taxpayer money. That is that third of your income that the U.S. government takes. This general, was like, how do I burn $1 billion? Returning the money, he says, was not an option. Another official that the inspector general spoke to said he refused to cancel a multi-million-dollar building project that field commanders did not want because the funding had to be spent. The building, of course, was never used. right? And the phrase that you heard all over, which appears in his op-ed, was self-licking ice cream cone, right? And of course, an endless carousel of staff who would return with the same iterations of old ideas repeated for years and years and years, right? And of course, the senior officials never once told Congress or the American people that failure was a possibility. And that's the thing. The generals, the leadership, the Congress, the White House, everybody said that Afghanistan was utterly winnable. And there were plenty of chances for for reality to crack in to the highest tier of the government. And I want you guys to just understand what this means. These are years of your life. I mean, you watch your friends get killed and maimed so that a contractor could get paid, so that a general could figure out how to spend $1 billion of taxpayer money. And of course, it was hidden. And as Sopko points out, there were multiple military-industrial complexes at work, a development and human assistance complex, an anti-corruption and transparency complex, a protection for women and marginalized people complex. All are good and noble causes. But when it came to Afghanistan, he writes, organizations under these umbrellas, whether because of altruism or more selfish motivations, contributed to the over-optimistic assessments of the situation to keep the funds flowing. Self-serving delusion was America's most formidable foe. And even now, he acknowledges that up to $3 billion from the United States has actually gone to the UN and then gone back to help the Taliban in Afghanistan. So even now, our taxpayers, we spend $3 billion just to help the Taliban, who have taken over the country. And ultimately, he says, in Afghanistan, the Office of the Special Inspector General is often the only government agency reliably reporting on the situation on the ground. And he says, we face stiff opposition from officials in the Department of Defense, state, USAID, and organizations that supported their programs. And I want you guys to understand, it's almost hard for a civilian to contextualize what it means to have made this massive sacrifice for your country and then to see in an unvarnished way that the entire exercise was a pointless fraud, was a cash grab for companies to earn billions of dollars that you, the warfighter, would never see. And I want you to understand, this is not a justification of what these guys did. This is how the funnel starts. People ask, well, how do you end up at a point where you're parked in front of the Trump Hotel or where you're in this truck outside of a crowded area believing that you or other innocent Americans need to die, that you hate your government and your world so much that you feel this way when you were at one point someone willing to fight to the last for your government's goals. That's the thing you should walk away from. Now, I got to make two requests because you notice this is a pretty controversial video. This isn't going to make me exactly any friends. So I need two things from you guys. One is to hit the subscribe button because that makes a difference. That helps me. Two is to check me out, combatvetnews.com. Literally, I've been booted off Patreon. That's how reviled I am by the algorithmic powers that be. But don't worry, I have combatvetnews.com. That's my version of Patreon. Twice a week, we drop videos. The members get Q&As. We get uncensored combat footage from the front lines. Units I met in Ukraine send me footage all the time. It's really good stuff. Okay. So now that you understand what it feels like a little bit to have been so badly rug pulled by your government, again, I'm trying to even think of an analogy. Maybe it's like, imagine you went to a university, you spent 4 years, you get into massive student debt, you come out, you got your degree, and then the next year, turns out the university chancellor and all your professors were frauds. That they actually just took your tuition money and ran. None of them were qualified. You don't have a computer science degree. You don't have a degree in underwater basket weaving. It's worthless. You were never accredited. And not only does that get revealed, not only is no one ever held accountable, but then you watch your professors and the chancellor and the dean, they get to move on to bigger, more prestigious universities. They are shaking hands with the governor. They're becoming leaders and very wealthy ones at that. How does that feel? Put yourself in that emotional state, right? And ramp it up to the point where, again, you have permanent scars, injuries, your friends are dead, and these guys are cashing more fat checks and letting their careers just skyrocket. And then, how do you think it feels when you read shit like this? Right? This is from November 28th of this year. I'm pointing out that the veterans get too many disability payments. There's too many of those fucking disabled veterans. We maimed too many of our own citizens, and now we have to pay them. You know what wasn't? You know where was this article about the absurdly generous benefits paid to those Afghan building companies? Where was the absurdly generous benefits paid to the hundreds of thousands of Afghan ghost soldiers who no-showed, just pocketed U.S. salaries? Where's the absurdly generous benefits that we paid out to the fucking Taliban? Maybe we should go there and claw back some of our funds. You read shit like this, and you go, well, what the fuck? Well, maybe veterans are doing fine. You know, veterans are disproportionately likely to be men. And as you can see, here's what I wanted to take a look, because I think this is important. This chart is inflation-adjusted earnings for men from 2000 to today. And so if you, let's say, you're Mr. Livsberger, it's 2010. What's the median salary of an adult male that's working full time? You're going to make, we're going to say $384 a week. Not bad, right? Then you fast forward to second quarter of 2023. Average wage earner now earns $390. 15 years of working, and salaries have increased by nothing. Nothing. And you see how it gets harder, right? You look at the same thing. Median weekly earnings for men 16 and over, 2010, 384. Today, 393. This is the kind of shit that people see, and they are like, wow, everyone in this operation, everyone who was safe and intact and fine and never was at risk, they all got paid. DynCorp got paid, right? Everybody got paid but you. And then when you place it in that context, once you sit there and go, my government never deserved my loyalty. It never deserved the people that put on the uniform and fought for it. What happens when you have literally, there's something like 10 to 20 million veterans in the United States, right? Let's see. How many GWAT vets US? Let's see. 8 million. 8 million US veterans, right? What they say are Gulf War era veterans. When you have 8 million of these people and all of them feel the same level of betrayal on at least some level of betrayal. And again, of that 8 million, about 3 million served in the global war on terror. But when you have 3 million people that have all been personally wronged by the US government, does it really shock you that some of them are going to look and fall down these paths of radicalization? It shouldn't. It shouldn't. And I'd love to tell you that I have some sort of like way to do better, but it would be comically easy to have a government that just at least tries to performatively serve the public. But even that seems like a bridge too far. We can't get Congress to stop insider trading. Like that is something that is just rudimentary, a rudimentary sign of good faith. And if our leadership can't do that, right, then who cares? Who cares? The guy who bought the election is out there saying, maybe we should just import a bunch of Indian workers to replace American workers. They'll do it for less. I'm sure that those non-existent salary gains, yeah, we're going to try to erase those too. This is the country. And so does it shock you that people, especially the people who gave the most to it, are feeling the most betrayed? Anyway, I don't care what you think. Comment if you like. See ya.